Welcome to Light Tackle Week, guys. This week we're going to have some start guests here talking about everything light tackle that you need to know for the Chesapeake Bay. This is leading up to our sales event April 13th. Make sure you go to our website at anglersannapolis.com to check out all the great sales happening that weekend. We're going to have some great items on sale. And once again, let's start off with this seminar right here. And this is going to be here with Coach John Jenkins. Obviously, he makes Coach Jig Heads. And we're going to talk about a really good topic here, Coach. And this is going to be pretty much selecting the right size jig for different conditions and whatnot. As you know, there's a lot of new anglers that have no clue where to start. They get confused when they see all these, weights, sizes, and whatnot. And of course, you've been doing this for a long time. So tell us a little bit about, how you start with, your weight and jig size and everything like that.
Yeah, when Michael asked me to talk today, I was trying to figure out what to talk about. And when I started about 15 years ago, I struggled. I struggled big time. And I think one of the things I struggled with most was determining what size jig head to use on a certain day. So I had a good teacher, Sean, but it was really a struggle. I felt like that I wasn't keeping in touch with the line and I couldn't tell what jig head to use. So I've talked to a lot of people since then who are having trouble catching fish, who are struggling, maybe no fish, one fish. The biggest fish they've caught could be a couple, 20 inches or so. So I thought we'd bring it down today to their level and try and see if we can help them be able to catch more fish. So the first thing I would suggest is you go out there with multiple jig heads already rigged up. I usually take 3 rods, a 5/8, a 3/4, and a 1, and I'm ready for the conditions, whatever it is. Sometimes the bite only happens 30 minutes, 30 minutes in the whole day. You wait for a tide change, whatever happens, the fish start biting, you got 30 minutes. So if you have the wrong jig head on and you have to go tide, dig one out of your tackle box, take some time.
Right.
So I like to use these 3 weights, give them a try, and then go from there.
Is there a weight size that you will say kind of for most of us in I will say normal conditions with light wind, not so much of a strong current you will use for let's say 20 foot of water or less? Or is there a base guide that you will say with water depth that you kind of think in your head about? If I'm going, let's say 30 plus, I'm using this. And if I'm going really deep, I'm going to go with, 1 ounce plus.
Well, that's why I think, the most common jig head used is 3/4 ounce. I think that sells the most of any jig head. The idea of having 3 rigged up, you start with 1. If it's not working, you go to the next size. If that's not working, you go to the next size. The 3 big critical things, though, are depth. The lighter the jig head and the more shallow the water. Heavier jig head if you got a lot of current, and even a heavier jig head if you got a lot of wind. If you're in a boat and you're trying to jig, as that boat moves, your jigs are going to come up out of the water column. If it comes out of the water column and the fish are up there, it's great, but if not, you're missing your bite.
Right.
So the best thing to do, I think, is you throw it out, whatever bait you decide, whatever jig head you decide, wait for it to hit the bottom, and that's the biggest thing. Most people don't wait long enough. They kind of figure out it's on the bottom, I'll do it. Now, soft bottom will create that problem. A real soft bottom, you don't feel it hit, but if you feel it hit, then jig it a couple times. Look for the fish on the bottom. If it doesn't, bring it back to the boat, fish the mid-column, about a 45-degree angle, so you've covered the entire water column as you get back. If you catch one mid-column, then you can go lighter and bring a lighter jig head in and fish the lighter jig head. If you're all the way up on the surface, you can use even a lighter jig head. So,
and of course, the wind kind of changes those things out, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I know we've been in situations where, like you were saying, I want to feel that bottom, and the wind's, let's say, really, really strong, where normally you could get away with a 3/4 ounce. Now we're going to a 1.5, right?
Yep.
And like you said, the critical thing is, I guess, keeping that feel, right? That contact.
Right.
What about the baits? I know there's some baits that might switch things out with weight also, depending on, I guess, the size and how buoyant they are.
Yeah, the smaller bait you use is less buoyant, so it's not going to make as much difference. But when you go up to a bigger bait, like an 8-inch Z-Man or a 7-inch Fat Boy, it will make a difference, especially if you add a skirt to it. It's going to slow it down that much more. So you can use a little heavier jig head, maybe with a bigger hook if you're targeting bigger fish. If you use, and this is doing is the bigger profile of the bait that the fish are eating. This year was a kind of a different year. We expect these big fish to be eating bigger baits, but they didn't. They were eating a smaller bait. That's why the 5-inch baits were working this year. And
like you were saying, match the hatch, right?
Match the hatch, absolutely. Someone asked me, a couple people have asked me, what color jig heads do you use the most? I really like the candy corn. I've been making this for almost 15 years, I guess. It's probably my #1 seller. Chartreuse and white has also always been a great color for me. And this year, for some reason, I started using pink and green. I used the electric chicken I'd never used much before, and it was a great bite.
I heard that.
all through the fall. So the color makes a difference. The skirts make a difference. The diameter of the line makes a difference, getting down on the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
The leader that you use. A lot of people, I think, really slip up on the leader. Everyone says use fluorocarbon leader. Well, it's expensive.
Right.
So a lot of people will use heavy monofilament, which I don't think is very effective. So what I prefer to use is a fluorocarbon line. You can usually buy 5 or 6 times as much fluorocarbon line as you can fluorocarbon leader, and it ties really nice and it holds up nice. As far as line size, I've always used 10-pound test no matter what size fish I'm fishing for in the bay, and I think it helps you get down to the bottom quicker.
Oh yeah, it cuts through the cold water really well.
And a lot of people say, yeah, you can't use 10-pound on these big fish, but you can.
Yeah, that 10-pound won't break, that fast.
One story I have for the 5/8 is I was fishing with Jamie and another guy several years ago, and this other guy was in the back of the boat, and he was absolutely killing the fish that day, just killing them. And he's making Jamie and I look bad, so I turn around, I say, hey, what are you using? So he tells me, and I take one, because I didn't have one in my tackle box. Jamie was too proud to ask, so he didn't. So anyway, it was a 5/8 round jig head, and I'd never seen a 5/8 before. So on the way home, I stopped by a tackle shop and said, hey, I want some 5/8. He goes, we don't have any 5/8. I said, what do you mean you don't have any 5/8? You're a tackle shop, right? He goes, no, we don't have any. He said, do you really think 1/8 of an ounce made a difference? Today it made a difference. Yeah. So these small differences between these weights can and will make a difference. So I ended up getting a guy to make me a mold a 4-cavity mold, and this is my second best seller right now, the 5/8 jig head.
Yeah, and I guess it's always one of those things where, like, cover your bases, like you said, right?
Yeah.
Have multiple different weight sizes. You never know when you're going to need them out there. And as you were speaking on these hooks, I know we always get this question: is hook sizes, right? Obviously, sometimes if we want to use a big bait in shallower water, some of these lighter jig heads might not have a big enough hook, right? Right. So that's one of those things where I guess always realize or match the hook size to that bait. Yeah. How far down do you want that hook to come out? Is there like do you think that matters?
I like a lot of hook showing. Right. I do. And I rig my baits wrong. A lot of people will rig their baits this way. I wasn't a bass fisherman growing up as a kid with plastics. Right. I can never get the thing straight and make it look right. I always rig it this way, and I like the action better.
Oh yeah, it does definitely give it a lot more action.
So I've had several people say, hey, you're fishing that wrong, but it still catches fish the way I'm doing it. Yeah. So now if you use a big bait, a big 10-inch bait, BKD or a Bustum, then a lot of people use that 8/0 hook. You don't use 8/0 hooks very often in the bay, but you do when you use the bigger baits.
Right, and that's like the gap, right? That's one conversation we also have is with these bigger fish, do you want a wider gap on that hook? Does it really matter? Does it make a difference? I think that's one of those big questions that some guys will have is, do I want that big gap on some of these bigger baits? I like,
you fish for big fish. So I like big hooks, big gaps.
Exactly.
And go for it that way. But,
gotcha.
So this is going to help you determine what jig head to use. You don't have to have 1,000 jig heads in your boat, but you do need to have a couple of each size. So once you get your jig heads down, you know the other things that are going to control which size to use. Then you need to go to catching the fish. Actually, you got to find them, then you got to catch them. So we talked about keeping in touch with your line.
Right. That's the most important thing, and like we were talking about, right? It's keeping that contact and know that you're there and you can feel it.
And there's a lot of factors with the hooks, the plastic and everything, but really the number one thing comes down to the rod that you use. Whatever your budget is, you're better off to spend 2/3 of it on a rod, the other third on a reel. The more sensitive the rod, you're definitely going to get more bites than some of the rods that people are using. So come in and get yourself a good rod, and I think you'll see it pay off in the long run.
So those were some great tips by Coach there. And remember to stop by their sales event April 13, where there's going to be some great sales, 15% off combos, rods, and reels. And if you bring in a functional trade-in of a rod, reel, or combo, you will get an extra 10% off your purchase. So make sure you come by the 13th and check out our sales, and we'll see you guys later.